It was one of those mornings that start off slightly wrong and keep finding new ways to get worse. I woke up late because my alarm never went off, spilled coffee on the only clean shirt I had left, and missed the bus that would have gotten me to the office on time. By the time I finally reached the lobby, I was sweating, flustered, and clutching my half-empty cup like it could somehow fix the day. The elevator doors were just about to close when I dashed forward, slipping inside at the last second. There was only one other person inside, a tall man in a dark gray suit, perfectly pressed, the kind of person who always seems composed no matter what. I recognized him vaguely, someone I'd seen around the building but never spoken to. He gave me a polite nod as I pressed the button for the 18th floor. I mumbled a quick, "Good morning," trying not to sound out of breath. The elevator started moving smoothly, humming softly under the fluorescent lights. I tried to take a sip of my coffee without spilling it again. Then, just as we passed the 10th floor, there was a loud clunk. The elevator jerked hard enough that I nearly dropped my cup. The lights flickered, buzzed, and then dimmed into an unsettling yellow glow. We stopped moving. I blinked, waiting for it to start again. It didn't. The man beside me pressed a few buttons, then frowned slightly. "Looks like we're stuck." My first instinct was to laugh nervously. "You're kidding, right?" He pressed the emergency button, and after a moment a static-filled voice crackled through. "They told us maintenance was on the way and to remain calm." Easy for them to say, they weren't trapped in a steel box 30 feet above the ground. The man stepped back and leaned against the wall, utterly calm. "Happens more often than people think," he said. I wasn't sure what to do with my hands. "Well, that's comforting," I muttered, setting my coffee on the floor so I wouldn't accidentally spill it on my shoes. I tried to check my phone for distraction, but of course, there was no signal. For a while, we sat in silence. Then, maybe because silence makes everything feel more awkward, I spoke. "I was already late for a meeting. My boss is going to think I'm making this up." He smiled slightly, a quiet, knowing sort of smile. "Which department?" "Marketing," I said. "And you?" "Operations." We lapsed into another stretch of quiet, the faint buzz of the emergency light the only sound. I could feel the minutes dragging by. It's strange how time feels different when you're trapped somewhere. I started to get fidgety, tapping my foot, then stopped because it echoed too much in the small space. Eventually, he asked what project I was working on. I told him about a campaign that had been dragging for weeks, about how my team couldn't agree on direction, about how the constant revisions were driving me crazy. I didn't know why I was unloading all of that to a stranger, but something about being stuck in an elevator made it easier to be honest. He listened quietly, nodding, not interrupting the way people usually do when they're only half listening. When I paused, he said, "It sounds like you know what the right direction is. Maybe the problem isn't your idea, maybe it's how you're presenting it." That surprised me. "What do you mean?" He leaned against the rail, thoughtful. "Most people in meetings are too busy defending their own points to hear a new one. If you want them to listen, don't talk at them. Make them feel like they discovered your idea themselves." I stared at him, a bit stunned. "That's actually really smart." He chuckled softly. "Occupational hazard. I've sat through more meetings than I can count." We ended up talking about more than just work, small things, random things. The weather. How terrible the office coffee was. He told me he'd worked in the building for years but still got lost in the parking garage. I started laughing for real, forgetting that I'd been panicking 10 minutes earlier. At one point, the elevator shuddered slightly, and I instinctively grabbed the rail. He noticed, his voice calm as ever. "We're fine. They're probably resetting the system." I forced a shaky laugh. "If we survive this, I'm taking the stairs for the rest of my life." "Not a bad idea," he said, amused. After what felt like forever, there was finally a clanging noise above us, followed by muffled voices. A few minutes later, the doors creaked open a few inches, and bright light spilled in. A maintenance worker appeared, prying the doors apart enough for us to step out carefully onto the solid floor of the 12th level. I exhaled like I hadn't breathed properly in an hour. He offered me his hand to help me out of the elevator. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said, smiling despite myself. "Nice meeting you, by the way." "Likewise, Jordan," he said, and for a split second I wondered how he'd remembered my name. I must have mentioned it earlier in my rambling. When I finally reached my desk, rumpled, Late, and slightly dusty, my coworker looked up in shock. "You were stuck in the elevator. For 40 minutes. With who?" I shrugged. "Some guy from operations. Nice, actually." She stared at me like I'd just confessed to dining with a celebrity. "Wait, you mean Ethan Ross, the coup?" My mouth fell open. "The what?" She nodded emphatically. "The chief operating officer. He's practically second in command here." I froze. The calm man with the expensive suit. The one who'd given me advice about presenting ideas better. The one I'd joked about office coffee with. I'd just spent 40 minutes trapped in an elevator with the COO of the company, and I'd had no idea. The next morning, I got an email from our. It was brief but impossible to miss. "Ethan Ross would like to schedule a meeting with you about a new interdepartmental initiative." I must have reread it 5 times. Part of me was terrified, had I said something stupid. But when I walked into his office later that week, he smiled in recognition. "I meant what I said," he told me. "You have good instincts. I've been thinking about how to connect marketing and operations more effectively. I'd like you to help lead that effort." I sat there, stunned. "Me?" He nodded. "You see things differently. That's what we need." That's how it started. A random elevator breakdown turned into the conversation that changed the course of my career. The project we launched ended up being one of the most successful cross-department collaborations the company had seen in years. I learned more in those months than I had in the 3 years before. Sometimes I still think about that day, how I'd cursed my luck for running late and spilling coffee. How I'd panicked when the elevator stopped. How I'd talked too much to a stranger who wasn't a stranger at all. Now, whenever I see the elevator doors close, I can't help but smile. Because that moment, that stuck, uncomfortable, inconvenient 40 minutes, turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me at work.